All right, guys, we're going to continue this conversation about dating. Now, we've pointed out the fact that dating is not a godly process. It is not found in the Scriptures, and it's opposed to the Scriptures. And so kind of the follow-up question is, okay, so if we aren't supposed to date, how in the world do we get married? It's an excellent question, and I believe that the Word of God has excellent answers. First of all, there are 4 principles that I want to share with you that if you will hold on to just these 4 principles, it will greatly help you in getting yourself or your children to the marriage altar in a way that glorifies God. The first one is that there is to be no physical contact outside of side hugs and high fives before marriage. And we've talked about that in previous videos. A very important principle. Don't go beyond it. Don't make exceptions to it. So first of all, no physical stuff before marriage. Second one is never to be alone with the opposite sex before marriage. Now, people might think that's weird, but most Christian people who follow the Scriptures would agree that as a married man, it's wrong for me to be alone with another woman outside of my wife. And there's a reason, because it creates a atmosphere where bad things can happen. Well, we need to use that same biblical, godly logic also for not just after marriage, but also before marriage. So the second principle is never being alone with someone before marriage of the opposite gender. Now, if you just follow those 2 principles, never having physical contact outside of things that are accepted, and never being alone, it's going to greatly increase your chance of getting to the marriage altar correctly. The third principle is we are to be equally yoked. Equally yoked. And that isn't just marrying someone who's a Christian. That's marrying a Christian that has the same values and the same convictions. And the fourth principle is that parents need to get to agree with the Scriptures that our role as parents, our chief role isn't just getting them out of the house or getting them to college or getting them to their first job. Our job is to get them to the marriage altar, even if that takes 35 years of life. We need to get them to the marriage altar. And the reason I bring that up, or the proof I have of that, is that in the Scriptures, it says, for this reason, you will leave your mother and father and cleave to your spouse. And that's not necessarily a geographical leaving and cleaving, but it is a spiritual one. That before the marriage altar, the parents have a covering. But then once we come to the marriage altar, you leave that spiritual covering of your parents and you cleave to your spouse, and the two, of course, become one flesh. So those are the 4 principles. No physical boundaries being compromised, never being alone with the opposite sex, being equally yoked, and seeing that parents, this is part of our job, is helping our children get to the marriage altar correctly. Now, I just want to give you 7 quick steps. And guys, these are not like, thus saith the Lord. They're just something that will give you a place to work with, an example. Unfortunately, in our culture, there are so few examples of people doing this right. That it's kind of hard. So hopefully this will give you a picture. These are 7 steps of advice I would give to a young man or woman. This is what I give to my children, even as young as 4, 5, 6 years old, because I want them to be excited about growing up and getting married. And I say, okay, so these are 7 things that need to be in place, 7 steps to get you to the marriage altar. First one is you need to get your child on board with these principles. What does that mean? It means that your child needs to be on board with the fact that dating is wrong, and that they shouldn't kiss someone till the altar. If you instead let your child believe what the world believes and just try to put rules on them, that's going to create bitterness, and it's just not going to work. Second thing you need to do is you need to make a list. Your child needs to make a list of what they are looking for in a spouse. So how do they want their spouse to have a biblical worldview? For my sons, do they want to find a wife that is career-orientated or home-orientated? What role is the television going to have in your home? How are you going to educate your children? How are you going to manage your money? These are very important issues that you want to find people who are like-minded. My wife, she came up with a list of about 20 things that she wanted in a spouse. Now, something I want to share with you is I didn't meet all of the things on that list. So I'm not saying these lists are, okay, you have to make all of these or else you're out. No, you need to be sensitive to the Spirit. For instance, my wife, blue eyes, curly blonde hair, I didn't meet that. But fortunately, I met enough of the spiritual qualifications that she said, okay, I think this is a good match. And making a list, it gets your children excited about doing things God's way, marriage God's way, and it gets them looking very specifically at what to expect in a future spouse. So if the list is just, I just want a Christian, well, there's lots of fish in the sea. But once you start, especially the more biblically minded you are, it really gets narrowed down to where, okay, I'm looking for a very specific someone. And that leads to the third one, is that then when your child is the appropriate age, you need to find appropriate avenues for your child to meet these people. And there are conferences, there are groups, there are all kinds of ways and avenues out there to go meet these people. Some people think, no, you need to just trust God and God's going to bring the person to you. Well, if you feel led to do that, that's fine, but we don't do that in other areas of life. If your kid is into a sport or into dance or something like that, and you want to find a good team, you don't just say, okay, I'm just going to wait for God to bring a team. No, you go out and you look for that coach or for that instructor or for that teacher. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, okay, God, we trust you, and stepping up by faith, we are going to seek avenues to appropriately meet a suitor for our child. Okay, so now let's say that your daughter, for instance, she's 16, 17, 18, maybe older, I'm not sure, but let's say that she meets a boy that she is very interested in, and the more that she gets to know him in an appropriate setting, the more he's matching up to what she wants in a spouse. Now, keep in mind, they are never alone. Keep in mind, there's no physical contact. Eventually he is going to initiate, if he also likes her, which is very important. If he isn't interested in her, then there's no point pursuing that. But if he comes and says, hey, I really like you, I want to get to know you better, this is very, very important. Right away, she needs to joyfully and thankfully, respectfully direct that young man to her father and say, okay, you need to connect with my dad, and you guys need to talk about this. And this is where, once again, the parents are supposed to be involved in this process. And so the dad would sit down, and the mom also would sit down with this young man and say, okay, what are your intentions? What are your goals? They would ask them questions about the vision that this man has for his future. What does he want out of a spouse? What are his expectations? And very, very important step. Okay, at this point, if the parents are getting involved, and keep in mind that the boy and girl are spending time together in groups of people, hopefully families more than anything else, but they're spending time, never alone, never physical. Once the parents get involved, now it's time to enter into courtship, which is kind of like the small step before engagement. And actually, you don't have to officially do it. As long as you're spending time together, this is when the parents of both families get involved. Now, guys, there's always exceptions. Families are there's all kinds of facts, but this is what, generally speaking, it should look like, is for parents to get involved, for families to get to know each other, for siblings to get to know the potential suitor, and to make sure that this is a match. And something very, very, very important is to see the way, so if there's a man interested in my daughter, I'm going to look at the way that his dad treats his mom. I'm going to look at the way that their family operates to get a vibe, to get a feel for, okay, what's this boy's background and family, and what is he going to be thinking? And hopefully, if I look and see, wow, there's lots of love, respect, Christ is very present in that family, it's just going to confirm more and more that this is a match. And once it's confirmed it's a match, now it's time to enter into engagement. And the thing that I want to encourage you with engagement is it needs to be short. Keep in mind, once they're engaged, this doesn't mean that now they can be alone together. It doesn't mean that now they can cross those physical boundaries. No, that's not until the day of marriage. They are still never alone. They're spending time with families. They're spending time with friends, always in the company of others, always being held accountable, always with a chaperone, if you want to use that word. And this isn't because we don't trust them. This isn't because they're children. It's because we value purity. We value it so much that we are going to take care of them in that context. That's an act of love and an act of respect. And a girl especially should respect the fact that this boy values her purity so much that he doesn't want to even be alone with her until the day they're married. So guys, a short engagement, this whole idea of being engaged for a year and a half, it means that we value other things instead of purity. So you want a short engagement. The Jews, whenever they got engaged, they didn't see each other again very often until the day they got married. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, but I just want to say, or just point out, that the reason the Jews did that is because they were smart. And they knew that once you get engaged, once you know, okay, this is it, like we are going to get married, well, you want to start being married, and there's all these desires, and you want to protect that. So guys, courtship, short engagement, never alone, never physical before marriage. Keep in mind that the parents are highly involved in this, and keep in mind that you want to be equally yoked, so you really want to make sure you know what you're looking for. It's not get married to some handsome Christian and then talk about values. No, this is where you know up front what you're looking for. Guys, I promise if you follow these principles, it will greatly increase your chance of success in getting your child to the marriage altar pure and matched up with the right person.